Hello, everybody. James here, WSI, my guest this week on a very, very early autumn morning. He has joined me all the way from. Are you in Ohio today?
Yeah, Chillicothe,
Chillicothe,
south of
Ohio.
Columbus.
There we go. Then, so it is Bill Eadie, the mass superstar. Just one of the biggest characters, one of the biggest names in wrestling in the last 40 years. So, thank you very much for doing this at 6:30 in the morning, especially.
It's my pleasure, my friend.
I always go what when someone says I know your face, and I didn't realize that you watched or listened to Dutch Mantel with me occasionally.
Oh yeah, yeah. He's a good friend of mine, and you've now become a very good friend of mine as well.
Do you so of all, because I always love getting stories on Dutch or dirt on Dutch, dirty Dutch, as it were. When was the first time you met Dutch?
We came into. I had just started with the Mongols in one of the first territories that we came in and out of. We weren't really located there, but we'd fly in on Friday, do the show Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and go back out on Monday. And Dutch was in the territory at that time. Of course, coming in and out, we didn't hang out with anybody other than my partner and I, Guido. But I was impressed because he was a good worker, and I was green, so I'm watching everybody. I'm watching everybody for help and listening to everybody. So, but I learned after a period of time, short period of time, you can't ask everybody because sometimes the advice they give you is not going to be good. So, but I did learn that. But as far as Dutch, I've seen periodically at signings and conventions and things like that. So we've had a good relationship all these years.
Were you at the forefront when Ray Gunkel died, and then Anne took over, and then the whole Georgia Wars thing kicked off?
He had already passed by the time we got there, and the territory had split. Barnett had his company, and I believe they ran on Fridays, and we ran on. I don't know, but there was two different shows in Atlanta. It was a hotbed at that time. But his wife, Gunkel's wife, was running the company, and Barnett was running the opposite company. So we did TV the first hour, and they did the Gunkels set up the ring. We did the TV the first hour. Barnett's group did the TV the second hour, and then they took down the ring. So
How bitter
that
was
was my
it?
first introduction.
How bitter was the war, or was it more just like purely a business thing?
It may have been bitter with the promoters, but as far as the talent, it was great because there was two companies to work for,
Mm.
and I didn't know any different. Being the first territory and following a veteran, my partner, it was just a place to learn to hone your skills. So I didn't hear any scuttlebutt. Well, we hate these guys. You go into the locker room, and we're coming in, they're going out, vice versa. Everybody's, hey, how you doing? What's up? What's up? See you here. So
Yeah,
sort of probably like the AEW and WWF. If the guys get together, they're friends. They just happen to work for Target and Walmart.
How
So
come how come Anne couldn't make a go of it for too long? Was it just the might of the NWA, or was it something else?
well, it's probably like every other promotion that I was involved in there for a while. She got the wrong advice from the wrong people. Somebody else was spending the money.
Mm.
It's like WCW. They were spending money that wasn't there. So
She was spending money that was hers, and
right,
or someone was
yeah,
spending her money that
somebody
was
was
hers.
spending the money. Yeah.
We're going to go to back to the beginning. I mean, we almost certainly are already, but I also asked the subscriber faithful of WSI, could you give me some questions for Bill and Barry, because I'm interviewing them both, and we got over 200 back. So
Oh wow.
I've sifted through the best of them, and we're going to get through as many as we can in the time we've got allotted, because I know Chris is going to
Well,
run
you
you
can't
ragged.
you can't say the best of them now because they're all good fans.
Yeah.
You've narrowed it down.
I've narrowed down the best of the best of the
That's right.
questions, and I've thrown in a couple of the
Exactly.
worst ones as well, just for fun.
Exactly.
So we're going to go to the beginning of your career. Now, you're a high school teacher as a very young man. Where there's sort of almost a disconnect between you, going for a conventional job in education to deciding, you know what, I'm going to make it into pro wrestling. What was the transition from that?
Well, my grandmother and grandfather were big wrestling fans. We lived in outside of Pittsburgh, about 30 miles south of Pittsburgh, and of course Bruno was the icon at that time. And my grandmother and grandfather watched wrestling on television, so I started watching it, and I just thought, well, I'm going to try this. What if I don't try it? At least if I try it and don't fail, I said, well, I could have done this or that. But if I don't try it at all, I'll have this what if in my brain all the time. So try it out. Guido Mongol was the promoter at the time of the Pittsburgh territory. He just bought it from Bruno. And Larry Zabisco was trained by Guido. I was trained by Guido. Everybody wants to give credit to Bruno, but Larry was trained by Guido as well. So a good friend of mine who played ball with me, we tried out, liked it. 6 months later, we're in the ring. So
But it was such a
just by
close.
accident.
Well, it was just such a closed shop at that time. So how do you sort of introduce yourself saying I'm so and so, I want to become a wrestler, and not get like left out of the room?
Just being brazen. Just, hey, what are you going to do? Say no? If you say no, at least I tried. And it was closed. It was a closed fraternity. Uh, and I guess I was fortunate, right place at the right time. Guido and Guido and Beppo uh, were traveling, and Nikita Koloff, or was it Volkov? Anyway, Nikita. Um, Nikolai
Nikolai
Volkov,
Volkov, yeah.
that's what it was. Nikolai Volkov was Guido's original partner. And after we got trained, they were in Louisiana, and Nikolai had an accident and ruptured his spleen. So he had to take some time off. So they were scheduled to go to Japan. So Guido calls me and said, you want to go to Japan? I said, I guess. So here I am. I'm really green. Don't know much. He's in my ear all the way on the plane from Pittsburgh to Tokyo, telling me how it is in Japan, how rough they are, how stiff they are. And I got off that damn plane. I could have walked through the walls. And for about the first week of a 8-week tour, I was beating the shit out of people. And Inoki comes over to me one night and he says, hey, Bill, loosen up a little bit. But in the long run, it served me well because nobody was picking on me. And I watched other guys, young guys, they got picked on. And here I was, this stiff guy beating up everybody. So they figured, well, I better stay away from him. And I was 300 pounds at the time, so in pretty good shape.
I hear quite a lot of stories about Japan when someone brand new gaijin goes over, they're in their first match. That's the test
Oh
match.
boy.
They will, in fact, you've already got a story, I know. So the very first match, and someone's looking to test you, surely?
Oh yeah, yeah. And you don't realize it, and I wouldn't have realized it, but if I wouldn't have got the pep talk on the way over, because the only way that the young boys can move up the ladder is to take advantage of somebody. And I saw in all my years over there, I saw a lot of young guys have miserable trips. So you set the stage that first couple of days if you're going to make it or not make it. So to have the office come and say, loosen up, I knew I was in good shape.
The first trip over, and I've been to Japan once, and it's an amazing country, and I'm going again next year as well. Talk about the culture shock of a Riot, because I mean you've been a huge star in Japan for 20 years, or working main events for New Japan and
Yeah.
beyond. But the very first time you went, the culture shock.
Oh, I loved it from the first trip. I mean, of course, I was in awe of all the just the travel effect of going over there and experiencing it. But the people are very polite, honest. I love the food. I enjoy. I'm a history teacher, so I enjoyed the aesthetic value of the history. Uh, First class operation. Inoki's group, New Japan, was everything was first class travel, first class hotels. They take you out 2 or 3 times a week to eat, so that you know the money you're going to make. There's no once you make the deal, you don't have to worry about it. So I have nothing but positive about being over in Japan.
What was your reaction to the first time you were handed like a dried squid that looked like it'd been ironed, and you said, "There you go, have that."
Well, you get that in the convenience stores or the 7-Elevens at that time. But it's you get used to it. But I like to experiment with food anyway. So I can go from steaks to snakes, so it doesn't matter.
uh, talk about, if you would, the Yakuza and their involvement in wrestling, and when you started learning that at some point, somewhere, the local mafia was involved in pro wrestling and why they were in pro wrestling.
Well, I didn't realize it until a few tours later, uh, and then I witnessed it one time when there was like a semi blockade of the television production because I guess some payments weren't made. So all the people, instead of being in the arena, were held outside until I guess some kind of a transaction was made. And then you notice a lot of the seats around ringside are taken up by certain individuals. But I was used to that in the States. I mean, I'm familiar with it in the States.
Mm. There was Shane Douglas, when I was interviewing him, he always says, the guys whose noses look like that. And you can always
Not
spot them.
always. Yeah, not always. I mean, there's some traditional looking individuals.
Mm.
I speak from personal knowledge on that. I can't divulge. I don't want to get people on
Hey,
my shoulder.
that's fine. There's no such thing as a mafia. That's what I hear anyway.
No, there isn't. No,
One more thing.
it's a fraternity.
Yeah. One more thing about Japan is the sponsor culture. I'm always really fascinated by. When did you first start getting sponsors?
The first trip, uh, and it's nice because you get to go out. But it's funny sometimes when we were first over there as the Mongols, and as I developed and became more popular as a superstar. Say, for example, Andre and I would be on a tour together, and we'd go out. They'd take you out to dinner, and but you're going to like the 15 clubs in an evening. So you might have a drink or two at one club, and then they're scooting you around to the next club, and then the next club, and then you have a bowl of soup and a salad, and then pretty soon it takes about 7 or 8 clubs before you finally get your complete meal. But each one of those clubs are being contributing to the financial aspect.
Where do these people come from? Were they always fans? Were they always the people that don't exist?
Yeah, they're paying tribute to like an insurance company.
But well, you can never be protected enough, can you?
That's right.
I'm going to go away from Japan. Oh, I'm sorry. No, there's something else that someone wants to know about Japan. Please, Smorg UK says, please ask Bill about the pay differences between Inoki and Baba.
I really don't know the differences because I only work for Inoki. I was approached one time to jump from New Japan to All Japan, New Japan being Inoki to Baba. But like I said before, Inoki treated me well. I mean, there was first class treatment. Every time I'd go to Japan, I would go from Japan and I'd stop off. I'd have my wife fly and my daughter fly to Hawaii and meet me so we'd have a little vacation. Say, for example, we were in Japan for 4 weeks. Instead of coming in and then home for 2 and then back for 4. Instead of going home, I'd have my wife and daughter meet me in Japan or in Hawaii. Well, almost every trip, Inoki would say, "Where you go?" I said, "Well, I'm going to go to Hawaii for a little bit." And he'd say, "Oh, great." So when they pay you at the end of the trip, your tour, they want you to count the money. And after about 2 or 3 trips, I said, "I trust you. Don't worry." But he said, "No, you count. And all the advances that you took are subtracted." Well, they didn't take any advances out. This was the first time. I said, "Well, you paid me too much." He says, No, have a good trip in Hawaii." So they paid for the Hawaii trip. And they did that every time. So then I got approached to jump from Inoki to Bubba. And I told the guy, I said, "Why would I do that? One, my slot will be further down. And two, these guys are great to me. I'm not, what am I going to do? Tell them that they're the shits and, the treatment I got was bad. So they treated me with first class and I honored them. And he found out about it and he appreciated it. But I didn't do it for that. I just did it because, I was loyal to it.
With that being said, let's say if it's purely business and there was no loyalty towards Inoki in particular, was Baba's offer to you worth considering?
It wasn't much more, considering the fact that there's 5 guys now that went. So now instead of the top 2 or 3 guys, you're number 7 or 6. And I was making good enough money that I didn't have to worry about it. And the nice thing that I had about Japan, during the Christmas break, they'd send me the whole next year's schedule and said, "You pick when you want to come." So I could go 12 weeks. They ran 20 weeks a year. They wanted me to come at least 12. I could go over a week. Sometimes Hogan be there for a week. I'd be there a week. Andre'd be there a week out of a 4-week tour. And some tours they wanted me to be on, like the tag team tour or the Madison Square Garden singles tournament. So where else are you going to get that? You get to pick your times, and then I could set up my trips to Hawaii, and I could set up my other tours where I was going to go to Montreal or Georgia or Florida. It was nice.
Were promoters back in the States all understanding that they wouldn't be getting you full time? You would be going here, there, and everywhere.
I don't know if they knew that, but part of it's like we do now. We're still fortunate. We book 2 weekends a month. And then because if we book more than that, it's like being on the road again. So once we book those 2 weekends, then we don't take any bookings, say for January or February. And we're fortunate enough, we're already into next August. So yeah, Barb's here too. He's a good friend. We were up in the Hamilton Comic-Con last weekend, and all 4 of us were there. It's nice because a lot of people want to take the time to take a photo with all 4 of us, which is pretty unique.
Yeah, I've actually interviewed Barbarian before, and in fact, because Chris arranged it as well. And I've told everyone since, gee, what a sweetheart that dude is.
Oh yeah. Well, he can be the other side too, but you'd have to be a butthead to get him pissed off.
You worked for the original Sheik in Detroit in the early 1970s, and can you talk about just like how hot the territory was at the time? Because it seemed to go from like the hottest territory going to just falling by the wayside like a couple of years later. I don't know if you were there for the transition of that, but what year did you first go there, and how many people were turning up to the event?
Oh my goodness, I don't remember the year actually. I tell everybody I don't have Alzheimer's, but I got part timers. But I remember going in, and it was just about a year or so before the downfall. And the downfall occurred there again. A couple guys involved, close and supposed friends. The Sheik went to Japan for a tour, and these guys went underneath him and tried to make a deal for their own, and then tried to steal the territory. So the Sheik had to leave the trip in Japan, come back and save his territory, but it was starting to decline at that time. But when I first broke in, that was one of my the first territories here in the States after Guido trained us, and it was lucrative for me. I was making more money wrestling one night than I was making a whole week teaching. So that's when I decided, well, I better try this. If I can make more money wrestling full time, good. I can try it. If I don't, I always have teaching to fall back on. So my dad always told me that have something else in your back pocket in case the boss wants you to do something you don't feel comfortable with. So that's one of the pieces of advice I give all the young guys. Try it, but there's going to be a time where the promoter, doesn't matter when, they're going to say, do this, do this. If it doesn't suit you, you don't feel comfortable with it, you can say, I'd rather not. You say no, you're going to get fired. You'll never work for me again. If you're drawing money before the door closes, they'll say, hey, come on back, we'll work it out. If they don't, you're not supposed to be there anyway.
So you alluded to that it's just basically falling down a bit, the Detroit territory. What was the... So I've heard you tell me, if you think I'm way off base, is that the reason that the territory did so well was the Sheik, and the reason that the territory ended up falling off was the Sheik. Was it a creative thing? Was it... you tell me.
I think it got a little too bloody, to be honest with you. A lot of those matches, and I can remember, I was even a little set back by all the blood and guts, and maybe the TV said, calm it down a little bit. I know that went through with WWF when we were there. Turner had to put the X on the blood on the television. So, and I don't know, I don't watch television currently, so I don't know what the situation is. But yeah, I think that maybe they had too much of the Sheik. That goes a long way. Mm. So, and the matches weren't that different. So, and maybe they weren't pushing young upcoming stars. So I don't know. I was too green. I was just happy that I had a job. Mm. I wanted it to continue.
Did the Sheik continue his performance, his character, you know, in public more than anyone else? Because I think I've heard that before as well, is that he was always...
You know, I honestly can't say, because there again, I was a young boy and they never came to me for advice or input. So I was just on the card. Later on, as I got better up on the card, I'd ask for, not for them because I was still too young, but I don't know. I never hung around with the Sheik.
We're going to move on now a little further up, and tons of fan questions in for this. So, and by the way, I've still not got my glasses on, so I'm going to be struggling and squinting slightly. Telly Viper says, please ask Bill about his run as the Mass Superstar in Georgia and the WWF. So that's a bit sort of catch-all and everything, but when did you become the Mass Superstar?
In Charlotte. George Scott, Guido Mongol, who we talked about, broke me in. He had been in the business for years and years and years. And George had approached me. The spoiler, Don Jardine, was in there at the time. He was one of their top heels under a mask as well. And George and I got along real well. He was sort of like a father figure. And my dad was always good to me, but George took me under his wing, gave me advice. And he approached me one time. He said, he didn't give me all the details, but he says, I think Spoiler's leaving. And after years of being in the business, I'm sure it was over money. Jardine was a good worker. He was in a good position. and he probably wasn't getting the money he felt he was needed. So he said, we're going to have an opening. And he said, I got an idea for you, and it's going to be putting you under a mask. He said, you interested? I said, well, I'm interested, but I first have to talk to Guido. And I talked to Guido, and Guido said, yep, I'm ready to go back home. He said, I've been away from home too long. He said, I want to take some time off. And there again, being green and young, I knew if the promoter or the booker came up with an idea, it's going to work, because he's not going to make a mistake, is he?
Mm-hmm.
So he came up with the idea of the Masked Superstar. My wife's grandmother made my outfits. She made my masks, my capes. I bought the other outfits and boots. And we had a loser leave town match in Greensboro, South Carolina, or North Carolina. Me against the Wahoo McDaniel. That was on a Sunday. Monday, the Masked Superstar shows up in Greenville, South Carolina. So, and for years, many people never knew, because the Mongols didn't do interviews. The Mongols were specialists, eyes, ears, nose, and throats. And for about 6 weeks before the Masked Superstar appeared, Malenko and I would go down to the Park Center arena where they had a ring set up, and we would go through holds and counters and escapes, stuff that Guido had trained me before, but I never used because of the character. And I started doing interviews. I was a teacher, so I was used to talking. And the Masked Superstar appeared, and people didn't recognize it. And only years later, somebody said, well, I noticed a little birthmark on the back of your arm. But it worked out real good.
How did you, I mean, you've said like with the moves and stuff, but did you have to also adjust your body language, the way you stood, the way you walked, to sort of throw people off the scent?
Oh, yeah. And I had to relearn. Actually, wearing a mask was difficult because you have to sell with every part of your body. You got to sell with your elbows, your fingers, your head, your legs, your knees, your hips. So it actually, I feel, made me a better worker, because I had to portray pain and all these feelings with the same face. The mask never changed. So it made me actually a better worker, I felt.
Are you more comfortable, because obviously, you know, in Demolition afterwards you use the face paint, are you more comfortable obscuring your face when wrestling? Does it help or does it hinder you?
Well, that little thin layer of paint obscures it too.
Mm.
So it's still covered.
Yeah.
But I don't worry about it anymore. But it was when I first took the mask off, but then I realized nobody knew what I looked like because I had a mask on. So that's what happened with the first partner, first Smash. Everybody knew it was the Moondog, Randy Colley. But they had no comparison for the Masked Superstar. They didn't know what Masked Superstar was, so they didn't know who Axe was.
Next question. Oh, actually, I want to ask one more thing about the Masked Superstar. Is when would you put the mask on? When would you take it off? Like, you know, I'm presuming you'd leave the arena with the mask on, or would you?
Yeah. I put the mask on as I'm entering the town of the event. Always drove up to the building with it on, went into the building with it on, kept it in the locker room, took it off in the immediate locker room for the guys, not like Mascaris. But it was as soon as I left the locker room, even when I left the building, I'd keep the mask on, but I would put a towel over my head. And literally, people don't believe this a lot of times, but some do, because they were the ones following me. Say, for example, I was in Greensboro, which is about 100 miles from Charlotte, or I was in Augusta, which is about 150 miles from Atlanta, where I was living. Fans would follow my van. They'd know what I drove. They'd follow it all the way to Atlanta So I'd have to zigzag through other neighborhoods and finally lose them. And then I could take the mask off. Or I could take the mask off, put the towel in between my teeth, and they'd pull up beside me. They still couldn't see. But I mean, that was part of the gimmick.
Hmm.
Contrary to some of the guys that wrestled, they wore a mask and they wrestled as a mask, and then they'd go take a shower and they'd come back out and they'd stand with all the fans with the mask hanging out of the back pocket.
Hmm.
There's no intrigue with that. Part of the gimmick of the Masked Superstar was finding out what he looked like. So in Japan, I had to wear it all the time, on the trains, on the planes, on the buses, every place.
Man,
But that was part of the contract.
how many masks did you have to rotate through? Because if you're wearing it every single day as well,
Over 100, over 100, and almost every color and multiples of every color. Yeah, well over 100.
we're going to move on now. David Huff has asked, any good Ole Anderson stories?
Well, Ole gets a bad rep sometimes from guys who don't understand him. He's rough and he's gruff. But my relationship with Ole, he never told me anything that he didn't fulfill. He told me I was going to make such money. He also understood my deal with Japan, and he was good with it. Ole would say things because it's like dealing with Andre to a degree. There's no shades of gray. Andre would tell you this way or that way. He's not going to, there's no gray. It's white or black. And Ole was sort of the same. So a lot of people didn't like him because he didn't tell them what they wanted to hear. A lot of people liked him because he told them what they wanted to hear. So my relationship with Ole is sort of unique because I listen to all these other guys that hate him, and maybe I don't know their situation, but my dealings with him are all good.
When people start talking about, like the greatest bookers of all time, and you were a booker as well at one point, Ole's name doesn't really seem to get thrown out there that much. It's more like, the Bill Watson, Eddie Grahams and that kind of thing. What was Ole's booking style and what were his strengths as a booker?
I thought he was a good booker. I thought he would take advantage of the talent that he had. He always kept himself strong, but not super strong. A lot of bookers want to be involved. They want to make sure that they're the main event or right on that same level. Ole understood that he might have to step in. Circumstances might arise where he has to put his foot back in the main event. So you can't bury yourself. So maybe you're mid card or semifinal. And he would push guys. Maybe he didn't like them, but he would push guys because he saw the dollars that they would make. A lot of bookers don't push the guys because maybe there's petty jealousy or they're more over than they are. I thought he was a good booker. George Scott was a good booker. I worked for Bill Watts. There was a lot of guys that I was fortunate enough to learn from.
Well, I was actually going to ask who were your sort of inspirations as a booker. So it sounds like from what you're saying, George Scott was the prime person who you base your booking style
George
off.
Scott. Well, and I give George credit because after all, he gave me the gimmick. So I sort of put him on a different shelf. But I saw George deal with a lot of adversity and sometimes animosity. But there again, he was focused on making money for the company. And when we were in Charlotte, I mean, that was on fire, that place. Everybody wanted to come to Charlotte.
Mm-hmm.
And then it transferred down to Georgia. And there again, Ole was booking Georgia and Charlotte. And both of them were making money.
Did you, well, I'm pretty sure you did. How often did you wrestle Ole and Gene?
As the Mongols, we wrestled them for a series until we lost the belts. And that's when I transitioned into the Masked Superstar. Guido went home and I stayed and became Masked Superstar. I would say maybe a total of a dozen times, 15 maybe.
Was it Gene who had the unbelievably powerful handshake?
Yeah. But there again, my 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 experience in Japan, Gene could be stiff, and he figured I was a young guy. I'm sure he wasn't doing it maliciously, but he was playing games, and we had a. I remember 2 or 3 nights in a row we're working, and he's pretty snug. So I was mentioning to Guido, says, give him a potato. So the next 2 or 3 nights I gave him potato. It's amazing how soft he got after that. He said, you almost killed me, kid.
Who have I never asked this before, but of all the people with like the strongest grip strength we hear, like Harley Race and Gene, and I'm going to blow his name now, the guy from who worked for Danny Hodge.
Danny Hodge. I never met Danny Hodge, but
No.
I heard that. Sweet Hansen. Sweet Hansen was a tough guy. And there again, I was fortunate enough to be in a fortunate or unfortunate. I'm working with Swede in one of the small towns in the Carolinas, and I'm getting heat on him. And all of a sudden, the ring gets filled up with all kind of fans, and they're coming after me. And I'm fighting it through it, and Swede's picking them off left and right, and boom, boom, and they're going out the ring. So I thanked him after that, but Swede was a one tough guy.
I remember him being in the I wasn't even born at the time, but I've seen him in the WWF in like the 80s when he was doing like guest refereeing and stuff like that, and I just had no idea who he was. Also,
yeah, he was working in there. I think he came back to the Carolinas just as we came in as the Mongols. Yeah.
someone has asked, and I didn't catch the name, I'm sorry about that, but why did you and Dusty Rhodes not wrestle each other more?
I don't I don't know the real reason, but the first time I was booked with Dusty was in Roanoke, Virginia. And I never met Dusty, but we're in the locker room, and Boris Malenko was my manager. And Dusty comes in, and I'm scheduled to wrestle him. And he comes in and introduces himself, and I said, nice to meet you, blah, blah, blah. And he says, we're working today. I said, yeah, I understand. And he notices Boris is sitting there. Well, he and Boris evidently had a real bad relationship from something that transpired in Florida. And he says, Boris, how are you? He says, fine. He says, I'm Bill's manager. And Dusty got this strange look over his face. And he said, well, I guess you made him a shooter. He says, well, he's not completely a shooter, but he can handle himself. He says, okay. So Dusty turns around and leaves. I go back out. They changed the match. I didn't work with Dusty. And I don't know what transpired, but I probably only worked with Dusty 2 or 3 times. I had no animosity towards him, but I think maybe he thought that my dealings with Boris or my tutelage with Boris was going to come back. I don't know.
So you never ever found out the reason for Dusty and Boris?
No, because we were really never in the same territories. You know, he was in Florida, and then I went to New York, and he came to New York later. But there's 3 towns. You're working 3 towns in New York, so our paths may have crossed during TV, but they're so busy in there in New York at that time. So,
did you work with Dusty? Now, forgive me if I've got this wrong, but were you on the WCW booking committee at one point, and did you ever work with Dusty in a creative capacity?
no, I was never on a committee. I worked with, I was booking with Ole. I took care of some towns with Ole. But my only dealings with Dusty when he was in WCW was that my wife, I don't know if you remember the gimmick that Buff Bagwell had before, Handsome Stranger.
Yes, in Global.
My wife came up with that character.
Really?
And yeah. And she was a big fan of that movie, and she thought, man, that's a good character for wrestling. So she came up with the character. We gave it to Buff Bagwell, and Buff got approached by Dusty to bring the character to WCW.
Hmm.
And my wife said, that's fine. She said, I just like a small percentage of it. So she met with Dusty and okayed it, but evidently Buff didn't want to give the percentage up. So Dusty tells Buff, he says, I want the character Handsome Stranger. I don't know what to do with you. So she got nothing out of it, and she's not going to let it go because her attorney, when they patented, said no, they have to pay you. So he went to WCW, but he didn't go as a Handsome Stranger, which was a dumb move. 10%. I mean, for God's sakes, that's nothing.
I didn't realise that, there was, quite frankly, much trademarking of names sort of, outside of WWF and WCW at that time.
Yeah, she's a smart lady.
Yeah, evidently so. I'll ask you one more question before we get some WWF stuff. Where were you when Black Saturday happened?
Oh, my goodness. I think I was in Japan, to be honest with you. I heard about it. Yeah, I think I was in Japan, either going to there or coming back.
What did you make of all of it? Did you sort of like see it as the death of the territories at that time? I mean, how sort of significant did you think that event was?
Well, I thought it was significant, but there again, Vince at that time was taking over every place. I figured there's going to be some type of an expansion. And there again, George Scott, I believe George was still involved with WCW, and he had asked me to come in to WCW or going to be WWF at the time. But at that time, I didn't feel comfortable doing it. I did later when Andre asked me to. And it wasn't anything against George. I was just going back and forth to Japan so much. I didn't feel I needed to stretch it.
We'll do a few bits of WWF stuff, and then I've got the first of two little games for you. Some more quick-fire questions kind of things. But KW Music has asked, how was Bob Backlund to work with? What was the first... I know you're not great with years, I know you said that, but was this sort of later Bob or earlier Bob when you wrestled him?
Probably middle Bob.
Middle Bob.
He was good. Bob was a good guy. He was, I'll tell you about strong. Bob was one of the strongest guys I ever got in the ring with. I mean, he lifted me up with one arm.
No, so you
did shoulder height.
Oh.
From an arm bar on his leg, a scissors hole. And I was amazed. But Bob was a good guy. I think he was misunderstood, and I think that his interviews weren't really that good as a babyface, better as a heel. I think that they probably should have changed Bob heel years before that. But good worker. Stuff that you could do was believable. He was one of the guys that he was sort of like, as long as you're in his ear and telling him what to do, he would follow. Sometimes if, not only him, a lot of baby faces, sometimes if there's a pause in the action, they'll want to do something. So you have to keep on his ear and keep telling him this stuff, blah, 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 blah. So, but I had good matches, I thought, with Bob, and I enjoyed working with him.
I used to do a podcast with Don Morocco, and he said that Bob got him with the, one arm lift up and then slammed him down again. Oh, my God.
Yeah, it's amazing. Amazing strength. And Don's not a small guy either.
Well, that was the other thing that Don said, is that when he ended up slamming him down, Don never got back up, and then Bob sort of whispered in his ear, "What's wrong?" And Don said, "Bob, you just landed on my balls."
that might wake you up. Yeah.
Yeah, they did some mat wrestling for a few minutes after that, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, do you know, I want to pick up on something you said before then. So, as someone who's done some booking in the past, how would you have best engineered a Bob Backlund turn to the dark side, as it were? And would you have taken the WWF title off him to do it?
Probably. I'd have probably taken the title off of him and made him go berserk and attack the guy. But it would have been a half-ass babyface match like a Tito Santana or an upcoming Rick Martel or somebody that the fans were behind, and he sort of snuck in and won the title, and then Backlund go berserk and turn into Crazy Bob and attack him, and then go back after his belt that was stolen from him that he should have never lost in the first time.
Did you realize that Bob was crazy when he was,
Not till recently. Not till recently.
Well, you never would have known he had it in him then, with the bow tie and all that kind of thing.
No. He's got some. You hear people sometimes out of left field. Well, sometimes Bob's on the other side of the fence, not way out past left field.
He's in a different field.
Yes, different field. He's in the practice field.
He's in the practice field. This sort of follows up, actually, with Bob. Mark Chapin has asked, I heard somewhere that Bill was considered as the masked superstar to be the one to beat Bob Backlund for the WWF title, but someone, maybe Bob himself, said such a short reign would not be in the best interest of Bill's career. Was this true? Thanks, James.
The story that I got was that I didn't have the amateur background. Therefore, someone who had an amateur background had to beat him. So, I mean, it is professional wrestling. It's not amateur wrestling. So that's what I was told. But that was brought up, yes, by Vince Sr. And then it was told that the individual that was involved in it didn't want to lose to somebody who didn't have an amateur background. So thus enters the Sheik.
Well, I know this isn't Bob losing, but I mean, superstar Billy Graham didn't really have an amateur background, I don't think. Hulk Hogan didn't have much of an amateur background, I don't think.
Nope.
Interesting.
But there again, I wasn't the champion, so I didn't make the rules.
This chap, Dominic D, asks, or please ask Bill Eadie his memories of wrestling Bob Backlund and Hulk Hogan for the WWF Championship when he was the masked superstar. So obviously we'll stick with Hogan on that one. So I didn't realise you challenged Hogan. It must have been very early on.
I think I had one of the early matches with him. I think that I know we worked in Los Angeles, maybe Chicago. There was 2 or 3 events that I had with him, but I was in the time frame at that time of trying to get my notice to leave the territory. And I had approached Strongbow. I had approached 4 or 5 different, because Vince didn't go to the house shows. So I'm giving my notice to 4 or 5 different, Pat Patterson, Strongbow, Rene Goulet, because I know it was 3 different matches. That fine, because I'll do these, but I want to leave the territory because I was going back to Japan. I wasn't happy with the situation that was going on, and nobody would take my notice. So I finally went home, and I got a call from Vince. Where you at? I said, I'm getting ready to go to Japan. Well, why? I said, I tried to give my notice 3 times. Nobody takes it. So I figured, well, I'm just going home. Same situation happened with Barry later when he gave his notice. So yeah, but I think I had at least 3, maybe 4 matches with Hogan, but they were good matches. And Hogan and I had known each other from Japan. We had been on tours before. And Hogan gets a lot of criticism, but I mean, he was the franchise. Everything was on his shoulders. And he brought this wrestling business to a different level. So but I don't have anything but positives for Hogan.
I think it's with Hogan. I'd like to jump in and see if you agree with this. I think he's really underrated as someone who, especially in the early days of the WWF and Japan, really put the effort in. And
He did.
I don't think he gets anywhere near enough credit for his ring work. Was he the kind of guy who, like Bob, you had to constantly sort of coach what to do next?
No, when I was working with him and what I noticed, I met him when he was Sterling Golden when he first came into Georgia, and he was very, very green. And then I saw him short time after that, and he had improved. He was always working on his craft. There again, he had a lot of things on his shoulder. He had the publicity to do, he had the advertisements to do, as well as learn and hone his craft. But he was, as far as I knew, and when I watched him and when I worked with him, he would listen, he would try his best, he would try to do the best in the ring. He was working on it, opposed to other guys who came later who didn't give a shit about the business, just wanted the money and the spot, a la Warrior.
Mm-hmm.
And Warrior was a friend of mine too, but Warrior didn't give a damn about learning. He was in that spot. That's where he was going to be. Hogan was trying.
Some Ultimate Warrior questions are going to come up quite soonish, I think. So we'll get to Mr. Hellwig in a short while. Just before we do, in fact, I've got some more stuff as well, but just before we do, I want to pick on something you said just beforehand. You were trying to give your notice to 3 different people in the WWF, Pat or whoever else, and you said you didn't like the situation there. Was it simply a money thing?
It was a money thing. It was a number of things, but I had options. Fortunately, I could always go to, literally, I could get on the phone and call Inoki and say, when do you need me? And they would say, well, come next week, come 2 weeks. A lot of people didn't have that relationship. So why not take advantage of it? I could work Japan whenever I wanted. I could take 6 months, work Japan only. I could call Ole. I'll be at home. And Wahoo McDaniel at that time was booking Florida. I could go to Florida, spend 3 weeks, go down there, take my family down for a vacation, paid holiday. So it was nice.
Why did you continue to work full time then? Because obviously you had the great deal with Japan going and you go there back and forth for nearly 20 years, as said. I mean, I don't know your financial situation, but I'm presuming you could have been making 6 figures only working Japan 12, 15, 18 weeks a year. So how come you continued working all the other territories as well?
Well, I was asked to, and I was getting paid. It's like now, 20 years later, we're still at these events and things, and then say, well, why do you do it? Well, why not do it? It's gravy money. It's free. Instead of taking that out of your bank account, like when we go to Florida, I usually book something in Florida, and fortunately we'll go down and everything's paid. I take my family with me, so we enjoy it.
Fair enough. Okay then, so I think it's time for our first game now. So I call it name. Well, if we can say it out loud, name association. I'm struggling with the word name there. I'm essentially going to give you a sentence, a description, and you throw back at me the first name that comes to your mind in the wrestling business. And it can be from any promotion, anyone you've ever worked with. And the first one is funniest person in the locker room.
Bret Hart.
Why Bret? Is it the cartoons?
Cartoons, and he's got a good sense of humor. He really does. But the cartoons, I mean, he was always, and we'll probably see him here today. We're in an event that he's there, so I'm sure during the breaks he's going to do some cartoons of guys that are at the event.
Who Which were the funniest cartoons? Who would be the subjects that he would draw the most?
Oh, he did Virgil once in a while, Vince periodically. Uh, I can't remember off the top of my head, but he, once in a while he'd do Neidhart doing an extreme, stuff like that.
Chief J?
Chief J, yeah, I think Chief J was on his top of his don't care list. Yeah,
That name might be coming up.
he was on the top of a lot of guys' don't care list.
Right, so Chief J Strongbow comes up fairly often when I do these interviews, and it seems to be completely down the middle. Some people loved him, some people were not so keen on him. What was it about Jay that sort of splits opinion?
Our situation with Strongbow was that he was completely one-sided for the company. There was no middle road for, understanding that the guys sometimes need a little leniency. It was completely biased for the company, their way, only way, and he rubbed the majority of people the wrong way. And he would fabricate some stories sometimes too. He would embellish stories. George Steele was the same way, to get in the good side of when he didn't need to.
So what would he say then? So between the two of them, how would they ingratiate themselves to the
Well, they would
office?
say that this guy's making remarks against the company. This guy's I witnessed sometimes where he would fabricate a story or embellish a story. Somebody might say, "Well, Jesus, I mean, we don't get any time off." All of a sudden, the guy wants more time off, and this and that, and that. So to the point where he doesn't want to come to work. That's not what he said. Maybe he'd like a day off to visit his family. In our situation, and in particular, they said we caused a disturbance in the dressing room against the company, and that wasn't the situation. They went through this period of time where they're making the guys buy their ticket home. You're on the road for 25 days, and all of a sudden, I live in Atlanta and Barry lives in Minneapolis, and we're out in Seattle, and they give you tickets to all these towns, and they want you to buy a ticket back home. Well, my dad was a riverboat pilot, went from Pittsburgh to New Orleans. They didn't get him off the ship in New Orleans and make him pay his way home to Pittsburgh. So we said, that's not fair. All of a sudden now we're causing a disturbance. So when it came to the point, push and shove, we met with Vince in Louisville, Kentucky. And I said, here's the real story. So after that, I was very careful in what I said in front of George Steele and Jay Strongbow. The only message that I told them is what I wanted them to give back to the office. They aren't here today to rebut that, but that's the truth. So if you want to come up out of the grave and counter it, then come on up out.
Bret, I think it's actually Bret Hart said this once, that certain wrestlers who became agents sort of went from a prisoner to the guard. You know what I mean? And they could be like,
exactly.
Yeah. Is it one of those situations?
Exactly. You're told that by the office. See, I was going to transition. I was going to transition from Demolition. Barry and Crush were going to keep going, and I was going to move into the office as an agent. The first meeting I had was in Rochester, New York. First meeting I had was in the locker room. You're going to do this. You're going to start such and such a day. Your pay is going to be such and such. And oh, by the way, you're now going to be an office guy and you're not one of the boys. And I told Vince, I said, I don't feel comfortable doing that. I really don't feel comfortable doing it. So yeah, that was the way it was.
Who were some of the agents
and
who were...
If you know me and you can ask people, I don't say much bad about anybody. It's the truth. So that did happen. If I say something happened, it happened. I'm not going to fabricate something.
Who were the best agents?
Oh, Lanza was good. Rene Goulet was good. Tony Gurria was good. They never got on you. They never, said this is what they'd like. This is what we're doing. Blah blah blah. They never made up any stories. Never stirred any shit. So yeah.
Last man standing at the bar.
Neidhart.
Do you know, I wouldn't have guessed that name for some reason, but Jim Neidhart,
Yeah.
definitely then.
Yeah. And Flair.
Fair enough. Yes, as Don Morocco used to say, Jim Neidhart was always on the quest to find a civilized Bloody Mary.
Yeah. I can remember Neidhart every time we'd go to, especially in Las Vegas. After the matches, he'd start gambling, and we're getting up to go to the airport, and he's still at the bar. He's still gambling.
Good man. Good man.
Yeah.
Biggest bully.
God, I don't know. We didn't. No, we were never subject to any bullies. I think people respected us because it.
That's fine. I'll move on.
I don't know. I don't understand. I don't know.
No. Smelliest wrestler.
Oh boy. I never experienced it, but I heard Vader.
A name that comes up quite often here. Most reckless in the ring. Who would just be throwing them arms and legs out at you with reckless abandon?
That'd be hard to say. I don't know because I'll be honest with you. Once the match started, we always controlled the movement. So they may have tried. Maybe a guy like Tim Woods, but I don't think he was reckless. He was always trying to do something. There again, if you stayed in his ear, and he was an accomplished wrestler, so he didn't have any need to be reckless. But if you didn't stay in his ear and keep step, he would do something outlandish and reckless. Yeah.
The nicest person in wrestling.
Oh my, there's a lot of guys. Tommy Rich was a nice guy. Martel, Tito, Brett. So many guys. So many guys.
Most miserable wrestler to be around in the locker room. It's sort of like someone who would bring the mood down, always had a frown.
Savage.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. We weren't around him that much, though.
No.
But he's always seemed grumpy. And I don't know why. I mean, for God's sakes. But I'd say, yeah, savage.
I don't know. He got to bring his wife, on the road with him as well. A luxury afforded to very few.
Oh, yeah. But I just don't understand the mentality. I don't know what was going on.
Person who turned up most late to shows.
Oh, Iron Mike Sharp.
What, was he still showering in the building the night before?
Yeah, he wasn't. And if the truth be known, he wasn't really late. He was just so early that everybody thought he was late. And Mike Sharp's another nice guy. I forgot Mike Sharp. He's another nice guy.
Heaviest smoker.
One that I witnessed probably would Harley Race or Dino Bravo. Dino Bravo was a heavy smoker too. Always had a cigarette in his hand.
Well, Dino and cigarettes. There's a bit of a history there. The weirdest person to be around. He was just like even too weird for wrestling, maybe.
I don't know. Tony Atlas is a little strange. but he's not too weird to be in wrestling.
Mm.
Uh, maybe maybe Buzz Sawyer.
Most memorable riot you witnessed or were a part of?
Oh my God, we were in Richmond at the fairgrounds, and I was in a couple riots, and they were memorable because one of them I got stabbed.
Mm.
Um, yeah, I'd say Richmond, Virginia.
So, stabbed, you say?
Stabbed, yeah, stabbed in the side. I was beating, tap dancing on Mulligan, Big John Studd and I, and people started entering the ring, and one guy came in the ring and stabbed me in the side. So everybody was pissed off at me because had to go to the hospital. We were on a private plane flying back to Charlotte that night. So the doctor sutured me up, and he said, "I don't think it went into your stomach lining, but he said, if you feel a little woozy, he said, you better get to the hospital immediately because you're going to have an infection." So we fly home late, and everybody's teed off because they're at the airport, and we're running about 2 hours late to fly home to Charlotte. So we get back to Charlotte, and we have an afternoon show in Asheville that afternoon. So it was a 1 or 2 o'clock show. So we had to leave around 10. So I just get home, change, get my bag changed, drive to Asheville. Get to Asheville, I'm sitting in the locker room, and I told Malenko, I said, "Man, I feel a little woozy." He said, "The doctor told you if you feel a little upset, you got to get to the hospital." I said, "Well, I hadn't had anything to eat since noon yesterday." So he went out and got me 2 hot dogs and a Coke. That's what it was. I hadn't had anything to eat. But there for a minute, I thought, I'm thinking, holy Christ, I got an infection. So that was a riot I remember. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, that'd be a memorable one. Did you
Then we
know?
had
Sorry,
then
go
we
on.
had another one. They had another one in Bluefield there again with had to run in on John Studd and Mulligan's match, beat up Mulligan. We come back, the whole building starts filling up. The guy steps down between us to block our exit, and I just walked by him and I caught him with an elbow in his chin, broke his chin. He dropped down to the ground. So we get to the locker room, and I go in the shower and take my mask off. I'm showering, and 4 cops come in and says, "Where's that masked superstar?" I says, "Well, I think he left." So he says, "What's he driving?" I says, "He's got a Cadillac." "Well, I had a van." He says, "You got a silver Cadillac." So they took out after him. So we got barred from Bluefield, which was good because I didn't want to make that town anyway. So 6 months later, I see the booking sheet. I'm in Bluefield, West Virginia. I told George, I said, "George, I can't go to Bluefield. They're going to have us arrested." He said, "You're a baby face now. They'll love you." So I pull up the Bluefield. The first guy I see standing outside is the guy that I hit. Still got his teeth all sutured up. And he said, "Superstar, so glad to see you. You're on our side now." Yeah. So that's a hell of a story, that one.
Yeah, tell me about it. Just before we move off that, what does it feel like to get stabbed? Did you even realise it had happened at the time?
No, I felt a little pop, but it wasn't as bad. I was in the building when Ole Anderson got stabbed. There again, he went against his own advice. He said, "Once you leave the ring, don't ever turn around and go back towards the ring." Well, he left the ring. He gets halfway up the aisle. He turns around. There's this guy bitching at him at ringside. Ole turns around. The guy reaches up with a box cutter, slices him from his shoulder down through his pec, opens him wide up. Yeah, mine was just a puncture. His was opened up.
I know, but
Yeah.
I mean,
Went against his own advice.
I know. Is it almost like a badge of honor? Like you're one of the guys who can say, "Hey, I got stabbed." I know it sounds weird to
Oh,
say that, but do you?
no,
No.
no, I don't. You don't want that badge because it could be fatal.
Yeah, absolutely. Uh, Best jobber.
Oh, George South, Horowitz, George South probably.
You'd be, I don't think you would be stunned, but I was going to say you'd be stunned how often those two names, and especially George South, come up.
Oh no, George is well renowned in this business, and he doesn't get the credit that he deserves.
As he says, he what bought how many houses by looking at the lights every night.
That's right. That's right. Guido once said, he says, I don't mind losing, but he said, I want to lose in the small towns and the coliseums.
That's the spirit. That's someone who truly understands, though.
Yeah, yeah.
Best. I don't know how you are with like giving out numbers, so you can be as evasive as you want with this one. But best payoff man and best payoff.
Oh, I would have to say Japan, and here in the States would probably be Charlotte and Atlanta, and the payoff was good. The payoff was very good.
With that being said, what was the biggest? I know you don't want to give the number, but the best single payoff event, was it a WrestleMania or was it a Japan thing?
Probably WrestleMania, but Japan was good too.
You remember which WrestleMania?
No, they were all pretty good. I mean, they were all comparable. Because in our situation, it was split 4 ways. It was, as a tag, it was always split. It wouldn't be as much as 2 singles, but they were good.
Now
this could have been better.
Well, they could always be better, couldn't they?
Yeah.
With that being said, this is going to be probably an unfair question, but the most talented person you ever wrestled?
Oh my goodness, there's so many of them. I'd say the Bulldogs, Brett, Inoki, Fujinami. Holy mackerel! There's a ton of guys.
No, I told you it was an unfair one.
Martel, Tito, Arn Anderson, bunch of guys. We were really fortunate. We were there at a time when there was so much top talent. You just switched the guys that night and you had good matches.
I was going to ask you the same one again by accident. The worst injury you ever saw?
To me, or that I saw?
Can be anything. So we can have 2 answers, in fact. But the worst injury you ever saw?
I wasn't there, but I witnessed it on YouTube. Is when Sid broke his leg.
Yeah.
I mean, that made me cringe. I mean, I know it was years ago, but to see the end result of that, holy shit, that was oof. And my personal one was when I tore my pec. We were in Jacksonville, and I gave a guy a clothesline, and he ran through it, and the thing popped. And there again, another one similar to that was when I was spotting John Studd, and he was doing bench press, and he was trying 600, and he had it up over his position, and he went down, and on the way back up, he tore his pec, and man, it just rolled and turned black and blue. Turned black and blue immediately. It was like somebody had took a softball right out of his chest. Ooh, yeah, I can remember that.
I don't know why anyone would, like, in my mind, that's an ego lift. And why would you risk an ego lift while you're on the road?
Yeah.
Crazy.
But there's a lot of strong guys. I saw Dino do 550. Tony Atlas and I were together last week in Hamilton, and I saw Tony do 600 in a ring on a tiny little narrow bench in a wobbly ring. Yeah.
So. Crazy stuff. I'm going to see if there's only a couple more left, and then we'll get on to the rest of your fan questions. Worst abuser of spray tan or baby oil?
Savage put a lot of baby oil on. Andre told him that a couple of times. Take it off, boss. And he did. Because if you didn't, you have to have the wrath of the boss. So he'd probably be the only one. I don't remember it being that prevalent other than a couple guys.
With
I think Hogan had Babe Below, but I don't remember him ever having Babe Below when he worked against Andre, because he probably heard the message before.
as I'm sort of giving away when we're recording this, but last week Dutch and I were watching Andre the Giant and Akira Maeda in '86 in Japan, and that was the time when this is the one where Akira just starts chopping away at Andre's legs. And
I was there.
You were there that night.
I was there that night. I was in backstage watching it.
Right.
Yeah.
So why?
Maeda was an asshole. He was an asshole, and Andre was only out there for the fact that he wanted to have a good match. And Maeda, this is just before he left the promotion and started his own semi-shoot promotion. So if you're going to pick on somebody, you probably maybe pick on somebody you think you could take advantage of because of speed. But if Andre got a hold of you, he was going to kill you. Yeah. Maeda was a butthead. I was there that night and watched it.
The story that we heard, or that we sort of said out loud at the time, was that Andre was almost like hired to be like a hitman in the sense of trying to teach Maeda a lesson that night. Does that strike true to you?
Not that I heard. I just heard it was the other way around. Maeda wasn't happy with the situation that he was, he wasn't Inoki. He wasn't Fujinami. He wasn't Sakaguchi. He was a fourth. He wasn't Choshu Riki. He was like in position number 5 and thought he should be in position number 1. Shortly after that, he starts his own promotion. So now he's number 1. Didn't last long, though.
How did it affect Andre physically?
Probably bruised him up a little bit, but I don't think he, if he'd have done that 4 or 5 years before when Andre was more mobile, it wouldn't have happened very long. But there again, I thought it was a cheap shot. He knew Andre wasn't mobile. He knew he was probably going to be able to get away from him. So Maeda's credibility went down considerably.
Really?
Yeah.
With the boys. Because I was going to ask, in the eyes of the fans, did it harm Andre?
Know.
Did it help Maeda?
I don't think it harmed Andre. I think people were aware that Andre was towards the end of his career. But as far as the guy genes, Maeda's status went way down.
With I'm going to stick with Andre. As you said before, he may have taught Macho Man a lesson for wearing a bit too much of that baby oil. Who were the guys who you maybe witnessed Andre teach a lesson or two to, or just didn't like for whatever reason in the ring?
Iron Sheik, Jake Roberts, Savage. Those are the ones. John Studd, beat the shit out of John Studd. Matter of fact, it was in Des Moines, Iowa, when I saw John Studd get the crap beat out of him. Picked up his bags, walked out of the dressing room, and never saw John again. Because John refused to not step over the top rope. Why would you do that? That's Andre's gimmick. At least when you're wrestling Andre, be cordial enough to step under the top rope, not over the top rope, when you've been asked by the guy that does it a number of times. And he paid the consequence. But he didn't like the Sheik for some reason. He used to play with Jake, and Jake will probably tell you that, and Savage.
What was it about John Studd? Because John, I mean, obviously the giant thing, one giant, that kind of thing. But
yeah.
But John Studd wrestled Andre for years, everywhere. So for the entire time, Andre just hated him.
No, they did work a number of years, and John was my partner in Georgia and Charlotte. And John got this idea that he was going to be replace the Giant. And he used to tell Andre that I'm going to replace you. I'm going to be the Giant. And he was taking growth hormones. And I mean, why would you insult the Giant? You can stand and make a tremendous amount of money working with it. Why would you do that? Say, I'll be the second Giant. I'll be the third Giant. I don't give a damn. And there again, John and I were good friends, and whatever got in his mind, I don't know.
Very quickly, did you witness Andre doing a great big shit on Bad News Brown?
No, I never heard that.
Apparently, he did like the sit down thing, where he held the ropes and he didn't control his bowels as well as maybe he wanted to.
Oh my God. No, I never heard that.
No, fair enough then. I'm going to give you one more, then we're going to get to the demolition questions, your demolition questions. There was a million of them, so I'll do my best to get through as many. But my favourite question to end it on is the most memorable backstage fight.
We didn't have many fights when I was there. I don't recall. Oh, maybe the Bulldogs and the Rougeaus.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But we didn't witness it. We just heard of it. It took place on TV, so it was in the hallways. But that probably stand out as one of the memorable for us, yeah.
Now, we're going to move on to Demolition, and as I'm sure you can imagine, the vast majority of the questions that came in was about Demolition stuff, and we're 120 into this interview, and I've not even brought Demolition up once, so some of these questions I'm sure you'll have answered 100 times before, but the fans want to know. I used to do, as I said before, a weekly podcast with Don Morocco, and he has claimed that he decided that it might be a good idea to have like a Road Warrior-esque team in the WWF.
I heard that.
And it's one of those things
that's
where...
not true.
Yeah, it's one of those things where a good idea has many fathers.
Yeah. Now, I actually witnessed that interview. It didn't happen that way, no. But it's nice. I mean, if he wants to take credit, Don and I are good friends, so...
No, he wasn't taking credit, but I think he may have said it to Fuji, and then I don't know.
Well, Fuji wasn't even our manager at that time.
No, he was Don's at the time, I think.
Yeah, the first manager was Jimmy Valiant. So we suggested that Fuji become our manager. So if the seed was planted, it would really have to go around the outside of the building and then down the street, and then finally make it to the garden.
Hey, as I say, a good idea's got many fathers.
Yes.
I'm going to go to the fan questions now. Mr. Moop has asked, how did you and Randy Colley get along? And was there any underlying tension between you guys after you replaced him in Demolition? For people who don't know, why is this person asking about Randy Colley?
Randy was the first partner. Randy came up with... a lot of the ideas and approached me. And then we talked to Vince. And I had a great relationship with Randy. I knew Randy for years and years when he was the Moondog and even before that. And after that, we had no bad relationships, even after he graciously stepped aside. The reason that he had to leave the position of Smash as soon as we went to the ring and he took the hockey mask off, our exterior mask, people yelled, Moondog, 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 day one and day two. We came back to the locker room after the first match and we talked it over, and I said, Randy, I think the gimmick's going to go, but it's not going to go because they recognize you. The second night, the same thing happened. I went to Vince. I said, the gimmick's going to go. It's not going to go with Randy. And Randy acknowledged that. I said, if you want to have Randy and somebody else do it, fine. I'm going back to Japan anyway. And I already scheduled a trip to Japan. So Randy said, no, I'll step aside. Then we went on a search for the replacement. A number of the guys that Vince had suggested had already been in the territory. If they took the mask off, people would say, oh, that's so-and-so, that's so-and-so, that's so-and-so. And I'm sure you'll cover it with Barry when you talk to him. So it was a long transition. We had to have somebody that they didn't know. The 4 or 5 guys that they brought up, and I won't mention, all were known in the territory as another Gimmick. So and Randy stepped aside. Vince promised to use him, which he did for a short period of time. And we had a good relationship after that.
There were rumours, and I can't remember who told me this, but I did do it on another interview that said one of the names who was considered to be a member of Demolition was Nikita Koloff. Is there any truth to that?
Not to me, no.
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 The next
he wasn't in the territory. All these guys, there was 4 in particular. All good guys, all friends of mine, all had good careers, but there again, all were known. As soon as you took the mask off, I go, oh, that's so and so. We're back in the same boat.
This next question, this chap asked, how come, basically, it's been over 30 years now, would you please let us know who the other members of Demolition were going to be? But is that just something, how come you're protective of that information?
They're friends of mine, and I don't want them to say, how come you didn't pick me?
Oh, really?
Yeah. They're
okay,
all
then.
friends of mine.
And
I don't want them to sit back and say, holy crap, I missed out on him. I'm saying it. We missed out on a good character. We had a successful career, so maybe there'd be a little bitterness there. I don't know.
No, well, you're probably doing the right thing there. I can't even read your name, I'm sorry, but someone asks, did you ever or almost break character in a match or during a meet and greet?
Break character?
Yeah, so in a match where, maybe you burst out laughing or something like that.
I don't recall. I probably did. I mean, I'll be honest, over all the matches I've had, I probably hid if I was smirking or laughing a little bit, I probably hid on the turnbuckle or something like that. But yeah, maybe.
Yeah. Another name I'm going to struggle with, I'll just say Phyllis. Who came up with the name Fuji the Stooge?
I did. Yeah, it just fit.
Why?
It's like the Three Stooges, Curly, Larry, and Moe. Fuji is the Stooge. It just caught on. It's like when we used to play a game with Mean Gene. Sometimes he'd mess up the name. He'd say, hey, Axe, and he was talking to Smash. So I always called him Howard, and he loved it. So, and it caught on because a lot of the comments say, oh, I really used to like when you used to call Mean Gene Howard. People will catch on to stuff like that. It's between the lines.
With Fuji, I mean, we could go on and on about Fuji, and
yeah.
I'd be happy to, quite frankly. But when I read that, Fuji the Stooge, and I was thinking, Fuji was a stooge? Was it just because it rhymed?
He was. Fuji Stooge just because it rhymed, yeah. He wasn't a stooge. If he did, he didn't stooge about us. So I don't know. And he never caused us any pranks. And I think Fuji was a very smart man. He was successful in this business for years and years as a single and as a tag and as a manager. And he never pulled any pranks on us because he knew where the bread was buttered.
Did he? Well, you just said he never pulled pranks on you then. But you must have heard of the old stories about. I mean, with Don Morocco. I mean, God, the amount of pets he's fed people. It seems.
Oh Jesus, yeah. Adnan just recently passed. He pulled a nasty prank on Adnan. He pulled a prank on S.T. Jones when he blew up put M80s on his radiator and on the engine, taped him down. Driving down the highway, and they all go off. About 6 of them go off and blow the hood off the car. So, yeah, he pulled some pranks. Some of them vicious, but nothing against us.
Is that because he was traveling with you?
Yeah, and I think he respected us too. I think we got along. Fuji was constructive with his criticism. He wanted us to have a good match. He wanted us to have good presentation. He would tweak the match. He constructively criticized the match. He purposely did not interfere until it was expected or till there was a spot, rather than a lot of managers sometimes are running around putting a focus on them. The focus was on Demolition. And then when he did something, he was the devious Fuji who did something on purpose. And then the attention went to him. But rather than taking it on him all the time and from us, everything was focused on Demolition.
What's something about Mr. Fuji that people don't know? Because obviously they'll just know about the on-screen stuff and all the rib stories, but what's something about Fuji that most people won't know about?
I think he had a good heart. He loved his family. He had a daughter and son that he loved and adored, and he liked being home. Unfortunately, at that time, we weren't at home very much. So I think he was loyal to the people that were loyal and kind to him. Some of the people, I think he had a reputation of carrying out pranks, so he felt obligated to do that from time to time. But I think basically, he was a pretty good guy.
Now, a lot of the Demolition questions are basically split between you and Barry. So if you think I'm skipping over a lot of stuff, I sort of am, especially with time constraints as well.
But, that's fine.
This next chap, Paul Earl, has asked, were you aware just how over you were prior to the 90s heel turn? The WrestleMania 6 pop matched the Warriors. Do they feel they were, or do you feel, sorry, it's actually written to both of you, but do you feel you're cast aside for the Legion of Doom?
Yes. Yeah, I think that Vince, and it's not only in our situation. At that time, the powers that be, and the power that be was Vince, was never satisfied. I mean, he wasn't satisfied with Hogan. He wasn't satisfied with Savage. He wasn't satisfied with Demolition. He wasn't satisfied, a number of people. So we don't take it as a vicious strike against us. But I do think that we were well received by the fans. And I always equate it, there's millions and billions of Chinese. And there's some Demolition Chinese fans. There's some LOD Chinese fans. And there's some Chinese fans that don't give a shit about either team. So, yeah, I mean, they had their following. We had our following. It's just nice to be compared because they were good friends of ours, closer to Barry than I, but I knew both of them when they first started. I was in Georgia when they both came in, and they were both greener than grass. And they wanted to learn. And throughout all of our careers, we crossed paths in Japan and in different territories. And I think when they were interviewed, they never held anything against us, and we certainly didn't against them. So it's just nice to be compared. And when we're compared with all kind of teams like the Rougeaus or the Dudleys or the Bulldogs or Strike Force or Arn and Tully, it's just nice to be compared. It's nice to be in that group. Nice to be remembered. Good company.
I think you said in an interview prior that I've seen that you, when the Legion of Doom come in, you're paired together right away, pretty much.
Yeah. Too quick.
Exactly. Well, that's sort of what I was getting at. How would you have booked it differently? Was it something that should have been built up, for months on end, the two strongest teams in the WWF kind of thing?
Well, I think it's, they had mentioned it years ago as well. You got Demolition and you got Legion of Doom, Road Wars. They changed the name Legion of Doom. There again, probably for marketing rights and so forth like this. It should have been at least 6 months, 8 months, probably a year. We could have been battling teams. They could have been battling teams and anticipate. At least could have gone from one WrestleMania to the next WrestleMania. And it didn't. They threw it together. And I used to equate it to where they had Flair finally came in to WWF against Hogan. They threw that together right away. And once the ketchup's out of the bottle, you're waiting and you're waiting and you're waiting. And once the ketchup's out of the bottle, plop, it's out. You can't push it back in. So we could have waited a lot longer. And Barry says the same thing. I know that Joe said the same thing years later. Yeah, it was too fast, too quick. But there again, somebody says, well, all this is going to be great. It wasn't great. We didn't have good chemistry in our matches. It wasn't anything against them. We just didn't have good chemistry. For some reason, they felt that they had to be a little stronger than us. And we didn't feel that way. We felt, well, hell, if Andre could sell, anybody can sell.
Mm-hmm.
You got to get the people behind you. If Andre's there and the Masked Superstar is beating the crap out of him, and the people saying, come on, Andre, come on, Andre, come on, Andre. And all of a sudden he's getting up. We're controlling the fans. But if I'm going against Andre and everything I do to him, boom, boom, boom. Come on, let's finish this match. It's boring. Follow me?
Yeah.
So that's what happened.
So they were what, like 8 years or something like that as a team by the time they got to you in the WWF. Did they ever fully grasp that end of the business in the sense of, you know, you've got to be in peril at some point to get the fans behind you? Or did they just always think that the best way to go was just run through?
I couldn't speak for that. I think they were successful with what they were doing. They were successful all over the world. They were getting paid great. It's not that they couldn't work, you know. I don't know. I mean, you unfortunately can't ask them. So
now, unbelievably, one of the most asked questions we got was about a specific event, and it was about your specific hairstyle.
Yeah.
So, Breaking in Vain has asked, why was Axe's hair done up so nice at Survivor Series 1990?
You know, that hit the, what is it, Instagram and Twitter and all that.
Yeah.
And my daughter even notified. She's, Dad, there's something all over the internet about your hair. That was my last night with the office. I gave him my notice. I picked up my papers. I got my pencils. I got my stapler. I got my briefcase. I'm walking out of the building. That's what happened.
So
I didn't want to put the goop in my hair.
Weirdly, I saw the thing recently as well, and I just thought, how come this is getting so much traction? Then you came out and you had the most lovely mane.
Yeah,
like freshly washed and everything.
That was at a Survivor? Was it a pay-per-view?
Survivor Series 1990, yeah.
I'm in Hartford or something like that. Yeah, that was the reason. That was my little. It's funny that so many years later, the people got the notification that I left on the desk. But that was my notice. Hey, I'm leaving the office today.
So legitimately, that was like, you didn't forget your hair gel that day. You were just like, no, this is the very subtle.
This is my goodbye. Yeah.
Amazing. We will get on the goodbye quite soon, but Wild Wine and also quite a few other people wanted to know, to Bill, how did you end up getting the part in No Holds Barred? How much did you get paid for it? That's none of your business. And just general experience being involved with the movie.
Well, originally it was going to be Smash, and I was very, very happy because there was a 3-day schedule. Fly out, tape, fly home. So I was going to have 3 days off. And at that time, we didn't have 3 days off. So I was all enthused and almost made a little 3-day vacation for the wife and I. So a couple of days later, Vince had told Barry he's going to do this. And I said, that's good. And a couple of days later, Hogan comes and he said, do you mind doing the spot in the movie? And I said, well, clear it with Barry because Barry's supposed to do it. He said, well, I've already talked to Barry. And the reason wasn't anything against Barry, and Barry knows that. Hogan and I had worked a number of times, like we said, before as Masked Superstar and in Japan, and he felt comfortable. At that particular time, he hadn't had any matches with Barry And he thought he was a little nervous because of the shoot and everything. So I said, okay, now I don't have the 3 days off, and Barry's happy because he's got 3 days off. So that's how it transpired.
Did you end up getting like a SAG card for that?
I had already had that from a couple commercials we did.
Oh, really?
We did a commercial for Walkman. We did a commercial for Pizza Hut, Barry and I, and yeah, we already had that.
I remember King Kong Bundy in an interview some years ago was complaining about how little the WWF wanted to pay him for the commercials that they got for him. Was it the kind of thing?
Exactly.
Was it the same for you?
Well, we got ours. Andre was supposed to do the Pizza Hut commercial. He couldn't do it, and he recommended Barry and I. So we split half of what he was supposed to get, which was pretty damn good. And then they re-upped it. They ran it for a year and re-upped it, and we got paid a second time. So that was all gravy.
Hey, mailbox money. That's what you're after,
Yeah,
isn't it?
exactly.
Now, we're going to move on to the Hart issues that go on to. I'm sure you've answered this a billion times before, but I genuinely had no idea about this, and I didn't want to learn too much. I want to hear it from the horse's mouth, as it were. So, as a young fan, I remember hearing the rumours that you end up with some sort of heart issue, and that's why you end up getting phased out of Demolition. But there's apparently more to the story than that. So, take us through.
Well, it began with all of my years. I was told by the physician, all of my years going back and forth to Japan and having sushi, especially shellfish. Every piece of shellfish that you have, there's iodine. The iodine stays in your system for years and years and years. So the more you eat, the more it accumulates. And he equated it to a guy taking cocaine. He said you start out with sniffing a line of cocaine. Pretty soon you build up this resistance, and you take 3 lines and 4 lines. And the next time you take it, after years, you take 1 and it kills you because it kills you from the internally. Years and years and years, 15 years going to Japan, eating shellfish in particular, shrimp, sushi, lobster, oysters, so forth, all this iodine buildup. My wife and I went to go see a movie, and I can't remember the name of the movie. Hunt for Red October.
Yes.
Which I still haven't seen. We go to our favorite Chinese restaurant. I have shrimp and lobster sauce. Feel a little tingling. Go across the parking lot to the theater. Get in the theater, and I'm burning up from my neck up. Told my wife, I said, I don't feel good. I go out. I remember putting my arm on a steel door. It was cold. And I passed out. And the guy's coming in. I pass out right on top of him. I squashed this poor little guy. Long story short, I'm looking, but I'm out of a body experience. I'm looking. My wife's holding my head up. And it seems like it's forever. And I leave my body, and I have this sensation. And I'm going up. Quiet, peaceful. I'm seeing stars. And I hear off in the distance. And there again, it seems like it's minutes. There's no pulse. Can't get a blood pressure. I'm keep going. I'm going up, and I see a light way up in the distance. But it's peaceful and quiet. Stars all around me. This guy has no pulse. I can't find a blood pressure. I'm thinking, the hell, I have a blood pressure. I take pills. Can't be me. So I hear him. He says, I got a pulse. Got a blood pressure. What is it? 25 over 15. I said, that guy's dead. I turn around. I'm back in my body. But I didn't move. My wife said I never moved. And I'm looking, but there again, I'm not moving. And I look over, and I'm hooked up. Both lines are flat. So I said, well, insurance pay for the house, car's paid for. I better call Vince. I'm not going to make WrestleMania. And I'm putting these things. There's this gray ooze. I got 2 file cabinets, and all the drawers open, and I got a broom. And then there's gray ooze, which I later found out that's things that I have to get done. And I'm pushing them into the file cabinets, but there's too much. And I'm pushing it, and it keeps coming. It keeps coming. And then the blood pressure comes. He says something, and then the line goes beep, beep. Both lines beeped again. Says he's back. So then here I'm thinking wrestling again. Says we got to get him in the ambulance. So they had put me on this. They said we got to lift him on a gurney. So I'm thinking, well, here's the gimmick. I remember watching a deal with superstar Billy Graham. They lift him up on a gurney and they tip the gurney over, and he falls on the other side. I'm thinking that's what's going to happen to me. The ambulance is open. They put me on the gurney. They rush me to the ambulance. My wife's standing there crying. And they're not even thinking about grabbing her and bringing her in. So I reached over my head, grabbed her arm, and she comes in the ambulance with me. We go to the ambulance, get to the hospital, and then after that, I go through a bunch of tests. They thinking about a pacemaker. They're thinking about this and that. You might not be able to wrestle again. So what they did, they gave me a series of tests. They went into my heart through my groin. The doctor, the mad scientist, he's the one that developed this technique. They go in, they charge each chamber of the heart. And he said, Billy says, he's on his headphones like I've got up at behind a monitor. He said, I tried to kill you three times already. He says, you're okay. So they said, we're going to try a pacemaker, but before this, he said, we're going to give you some medication. What they had to do is jumpstart the heart because it's erratic. So from that, I have a little bit of residue AFib that I've got still yet.
So how do you, is it supposition that you think it was from the sushi, or did they do blood tests and find that you had like
no, that's what he
levels?
said. Yeah, he said the iodine level was, so consequently, knows no shellfish, which for a period of time I missed, but I don't now. I have a Benadryl capsule injection I keep all the time. After that, I got allergic to bee stings and wasps. So I had 2 reactions, went to the hospital both times. So I have an EpiPen I carry with me all the time.
But you've still been wrestling for, on the indies especially, and for 2 decades, 2.5 decades probably plus afterwards. So,
yeah.
The doctors at some point must have said, "Hey, you can just carry on with your life as normal."
Oh yeah, yeah. They said I could. They said I could carry out. That was their premise at the beginning. They thought maybe you couldn't wrestle, but once they gave me the medication, it jump started again right away. He said I was in there for a week. Did all kind of rehabilitation after that for about 6 weeks. And he said, oh, you're okay. He says, go back to wrestling. Just don't eat any shellfish.
Stay out of the oceans. What did Vince say when, did you go and tell him about this? Was it?
Oh, he called me when I was in the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
He called me. That's when they first had the idea to transition into the office position.
Mm. What was the idea with bringing Crush in? So obviously,
as a replacement, there again, you jump a little too quickly. Instead of saying, hey, give the guys off, give Barry off 3 or 4 weeks, we'll be back full go. They had to replace me. So now we got 3 Demolition, and so there again, too quick.
Yeah. How come you left at Survivor Series 19? I think we've more or less covered this, but how come you went straight to New Japan, start wrestling again, through the beginning of 1991? So obviously you can still do it. And then how come you never went back as Demolition again? How come you never went back even as the Masked Superstar to WWF?
Well, the promise I had for the position kept getting less and less and less from full-time position. and full-time pay to part-time position and part-time pay.
Mm.
So why am I going to stay there and beg for a job when I could get on a phone and go where I wanted to go and do what I wanted to do? Hey, Barry. Barry just came.
Well, we've not got too much time, so we'll do a. What did he chuck you? I've got to say.
Hey, another T-shirt.
Wouldn't you know?
A long sleeve T-shirt. Long sleeve T-shirt. Oops, sorry. Long sleeve. We're getting into winter over here, and I told him last time we have to get a long sleeve because sometimes we were in Hamilton, and it wasn't cold, but we were under this we were in an airplane hangar, and the fan that they had above us was out of an airplane propeller. So where we were at, there was ice on the damn table. Not literally, but we felt like it. And everybody else is sweating and we're freezing. So I said, we got to get a long sleeve shirts. So he brought me one.
That's right. We'll do the plugs.
So now I owe him $3,000 for a T-shirt.
What, did he sign it?
Not yet, but he will.
Yeah. Better make it worth $3,000.
It's the new video game that we're involved in coming out.
Oh yeah, Ultra Pro Wrestling, and yeah. I'll get the plugs off you right at the end. Yeah. We've only got a few minutes left, so I'm going to run through the so many as well that I want to get to you. How come you never went to WCW with Barry?
We were going to go. Before we finished up, we had a proposal to go in. Ole had contacted me about coming back in as a Mass Superstar. And I was trying to push the fact that, well, we're well known as Demolition, but they were having difficulty with guys not wanting to work with Vader. So he wanted me to come in as Mass Superstar to work with Vader, which after I hear all the stories with other guys working with Vader, maybe it was a good thing that I didn't go. But then Barry and I were going to go in. But then at that particular time, and I think you'll talk to him too, there were so many different factions at the WCW. They had, like 9 different little groups that were trying to maneuver their way to be the top group and the top power. That neither one of us at that time wanted to go through those power struggles. So I went back to Japan.
And I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you this, and then I've got a couple more, and then I will let you go. You start bringing up Demolition again on the indies, especially I think in Canada. Is it? And there's a new fella called... See, I've got a load of different names here, but actually this fella's written Old School Pro Wrestling. Also, can you please ask Bill about his short-lived tag team with the Canadian Giant, aka Demolition Hooks, in All Japan in 1991?
Yeah, that was just one tour. And it didn't work out. And I was asked to do it. I did it because of my loyalty to Inoki. But after the first day, literally the first day, that idea was squashed. So it didn't last.
And the other one is the WWF, I believe, weren't that happy about it, but you start doing Demolition again with a guy called Richard Charland, aka Blast. So how long did he do that before the WWF copyright team came a knocking?
Well, that was... we did a couple events, I think, in Canada, but that was primarily for an overseas tour. I think it was India or maybe Pakistan. And I had already was involved in that legal situation with WWF at the time. So there was no set ownership. They said they owned it. I said I owned it. And as it turns out, I did own it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I do own it.
Nice.
And I own it till 2 days after I die, and I probably won't need it after that.
That's the spirit. I think we've got, let me see, we've probably got about 5 minutes left, so I might be able to sneak in 2 more questions or so. And this one was really interesting. In fact, Old School Pro Wrestling again asks, ask Bill Eadie about his match with a fake Ultimate Warrior in late 1994 in India. And he said something else here, but I don't want to give away the punchline.
I don't think he went as the Ultimate Warrior, though. He went as the Warrior. That was a good friend of ours. Forgive me, I forget his name now. A young guy that we used in Global Uh, yeah, we had a riot there. That was another question about a riot you're talking about.
Mm.
Uh, uh, there was a Indian wrestler who was also I don't know if it was a city police or a metro police or a provincial police that wanted to get into wrestling, and Tiger Jeet Singh wasn't interested in him. I guess they didn't get along. So the Warrior and I are involved in this match. And fortunately for us, it was an outdoor building. There was about 150,000 fans there.
Jesus.
And around the perimeter was the military. The warlord, the military warlord in that province had security about every 5 feet. And the reason they had it about every 5 feet, they had a long whip. It was about 6 foot long. If somebody stood up, they'd whip him and make him sit down. So they were around the perimeter at the top and all around the perimeter in the middle and around the ring. Well, long story short, this guy jumps in the ring. He wants to prove that he's a shooter. So he wants to prove to not me, Tiger Jeet Singh, that he's tough and he should be in the matches. So he jumps on my back, and I didn't realize what it was at first. And he starts throwing punches. So the first thing I was told years ago he says, you got to save yourself. So when he jumps in the ring, a couple other of his buddies jump in the ring, and the guys in the ring as well are fighting off. I reached up just out of instinct, and I stuck my finger in the guy's eye, and it popped out, popped right up, and it's hanging down. And he's yelling, "That's not fair. That's not fair." I'm thinking, what the hell's fair about it? You're trying to attack me. Well, his buddies are in the ring now, and they got these whips, and they're beating the shit out of me with these whips. Richard Charlotte is the only guy in the dressing room. Tiger, nobody came down. Horowitz is there. Nobody came down. They're all running around in the damn locker room looking for a place to hide. And Richard Charlotte hits the ring, and me and the warrior, the warrior, not the Ultimate Warrior, and Richard fight our way back to the dressing room. And the announcer, he's fighting his way. We're fighting our way, and it's like at second base to the locker room of a football stadium, a baseball stadium. We get in there, and there's a crowd of people. Fortunately, the military governor has his people surround the building, and they're beating them all off. And I was beat to crap. I was all bruised up and black and blue, but made the next night, though.
Yeah. A true professional. This fella here says you were attacked with hockey sticks, so it wasn't quite hockey sticks.
No, it was whips. They were like those batons that the police have that they flip out. Yeah, they flipped out, but they didn't come out as a solid. They came out with a whip on them.
I've got to say, I've never heard of a telescopic whip before, but go to India,
it comes
do
out
some wrestling.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'll tell you what, just before I let you go, I'm going to ask you one more thing, then we'll do the plugs, and then I'll thank you so much for your time. And probably you guys, you and Barry, Ivan Koloff, a couple of others, the most glaring omissions from the WWE Hall of Fame. Would you like to go in? Are you interested in going in? And do you expect it to happen anytime soon?
Well, we don't expect it to happen. It would be nice. I know that you'll ask Barry and especially Ivan. Ivan should have already been in it. It would be a nice footnote on our career, but we've been asked that many, many times. I think we deserve to be in there. I think that the recognition by the fans, the many people that we meet, all say the same thing, but we're not going to beg to be in it. If we're in it, fine. Neither one of us have lost sleep over it. We've lost sleep over other things, I can say, but not being inducted into the Hall of Fame. So if we do, that's nice. If we don't, and we die before that, we won't know either. So,
listen, it's been a total pleasure to have you on. You're somebody I've wanted to interview since I started doing this thing nearly 3 years ago now, so I'm so pleased that you're finally on. Before you disappear, I see you've got a nice Demolition t-shirt there. You had another t-shirt showing me. Where can people get these fine garments?
They're at Pro Wrestling Tees. They run a real good first class organization, and all the guys that they represent, they get money back from the shows. And then you talked about Ultra Pro Wrestling video game coming out, and we've got 4 or 5 Epic Toys out of there. UK is coming out with new figures, new action figures. The Wrestle Dudes is coming out with action figures. Major Pods coming out with action figures. So it's been really nice. We've got about 5 or 6 different new figures coming out with all the other ones. And the nice thing about when we come to events like this, we see all the figures that people bought, and we're always happy, and the nice interaction and the positive vibes and the positive comments. So thank you, and thank all the fans.
Yes, thank you very much for watching, and thank you, Bill. It has been a pleasure.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.